Stop being so dramatic about it, Julia. Your ring gave Diana the trip she always wanted, my father Marcus said with a satisfied grin, leaning back in his favorite recliner. You should be grateful we could help your sister instead of letting that expensive jewelry sit around collecting dust while you recovered. I sat there on the couch in our family home in Charlotte, North Carolina, still weak from my 3-week hospital stay, staring at my father in complete disbelief. The bandages from my surgery were barely removed, and I was discovering that my family had sold my $25,000 wedding ring to fund my sister Diana's vacation to Thailand with her new boyfriend. My name is Julia Henderson, and I am 37 years old. I work as a marketing director for Bright Hollow Labs, a pharmaceutical research company. 3 weeks ago, I had undergone major surgery to remove a benign tumor from my abdomen. The recovery required an extended hospital stay, followed by weeks of rest at home. During this vulnerable time, I had moved back into my childhood home so my family could help care for me while I healed. What I never expected was that they would see my medical crisis as an opportunity to steal from me. You sold my wedding ring? I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. The ring had been my late husband's final gift to me before he passed away from cancer 2 years ago. It was not just expensive jewelry. It was the last tangible connection I had to the love of my life. Diana bounced into the living room at that moment, her skin glowing with a fresh tan and her eyes sparkling with excitement. She was 29 years old, 8 years younger than me, and had always been my father's favorite child. Everything had always come easily to her, and when it did not, our father made sure to smooth the way. "Julia, you are finally awake," Diana exclaimed, rushing over to hug me. "I just got back from the most amazing 3 weeks in Thailand. The beaches were incredible, and the food was to die for. You would not believe the elephant sanctuary we visited." I felt a chill run down my spine as the pieces began falling into place. 3 weeks? I repeated slowly. Yes. Dad surprised me with the most generous gift. He said you wanted me to have an amazing vacation since I had been working so hard at the real estate agency. Diana's smile was radiant, completely oblivious to the darkness of what had actually transpired. My father's eyes met mine with a challenging stare. Diana deserved that trip, Julia. She has been struggling financially, and you have always had everything handed to you. It was time for you to contribute to this family for once. The cruelty of his words hit me like a physical blow, but something inside me remained eerily calm. I smiled sweetly at both of them, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. There was something they did not know about that ring. Growing up in the Henderson household had taught me early that Diana could do no wrong in our father's eyes. My mother had passed away when I was 15, leaving Marcus to raise 2 daughters alone. Instead of treating us equally, he'd clearly chosen his favorite child and made no effort to hide his preference. Throughout high school and college, Diana received new cars, expensive clothes, and trips to Europe, while I worked part-time jobs to pay for my own expenses. When I graduated with honors from the University of North Carolina and landed my first job in pharmaceutical marketing, Marcus barely acknowledged my achievement. When Diana dropped out of college after 2 years to pursue various failed business ventures, he called her entrepreneurial and continued funding her lifestyle. The pattern continued into adulthood. When I married my husband David 5 years ago, Marcus complained about the cost of the wedding and suggested we should have eloped. When Diana announced her engagement to a man she had known for 3 months, Marcus immediately offered to pay for an elaborate celebration. That engagement fell apart within 6 months, but Marcus never mentioned the wasted money. David had been my refuge from the family dysfunction. He was a gentle, brilliant man who worked as a biochemist at the same company where I built my career. We supported each other's dreams and created a peaceful life together, far from the chaos of my childhood home. When David was diagnosed with aggressive lung cancer at 32, our world shattered. The 18 months of his treatment were the most challenging period of my life. I took family leave to care for him, spending our savings on experimental treatments and specialists. Marcus never offered to help financially, claiming he was still supporting Diana and could not afford to assist us. During David's final weeks, when I was exhausted and heartbroken, Marcus actually suggested that I should move back home after David's death, because Diana could use the company. David's final gift to me was the stunning diamond wedding ring he had saved for months to afford. He presented it to me on our 4th anniversary, just 2 months before his diagnosis. "I want you to have something beautiful that reminds you how much you are loved," he had whispered, sliding the platinum band with its flawless 3-carat center diamond onto my finger. After David's funeral, Marcus made several comments about how impractical it was for me to keep wearing such an expensive ring. He suggested I should sell it and invest the money more wisely. Diana had also mentioned multiple times how gorgeous the ring was and how she wished she could afford something similar for herself. Their interest in my ring had not gone unnoticed. During the past year, I had caught Diana photographing it when she thought I was not looking. Marcus had asked pointed questions about its value and whether I had it appraised for insurance purposes. The attention made me increasingly uncomfortable, especially as Diana's financial situation became more desperate due to her poor career choices and expensive lifestyle. 3 months before my surgery, I had made a decision that now seemed remarkably prescient. The tumor diagnosis had come as a complete shock during a routine physical examination. My doctor discovered an abnormal mass during my annual checkup and immediately ordered additional tests. Within 2 weeks, I learned that I needed major abdominal surgery to remove what appeared to be a large benign growth that was causing internal complications. The surgery would require a significant recovery period, and my doctor strongly recommended having family support during the healing process. Against my better judgment, I had agreed to stay with Marcus and Diana while I recovered. I knew their history of putting their own needs first, but I also knew I would need help with basic tasks during the initial weeks after surgery. As I prepared for the medical procedure, a nagging worry kept surfacing in my mind. Marcus and Diana had been increasingly interested in my financial situation since David's death. They knew I had life insurance money, savings from my pharmaceutical career, and valuable possessions including my wedding ring. The thought of being unconscious and helpless while they had access to my belongings made me deeply uncomfortable. 2 months before the surgery, I had taken a precautionary step that would prove to be life-saving. I visited a jewelry store in downtown Charlotte and found a cubic zirconia replica that was virtually identical to my real wedding ring. The fake cost $300 and was crafted so expertly that even experienced jewelry professionals would need specialized equipment to detect the difference immediately. I placed my authentic wedding ring in a safety deposit box at First National Bank under my maiden name, Julia Matthews. Only I knew about this account, and I paid for the box rental with cash to avoid any paper trail that Marcus or Diana might discover. The bank records showed the box was rented to Julia Matthews with identification showing my pre-marriage address. For 2 months before my surgery, I wore the replica ring daily. Marcus and Diana never noticed the switch because the fake was so convincing. I practiced removing it naturally when I washed dishes or applied lotion, just as I had done with the original ring. The cubic zirconia caught light beautifully and felt substantial on my finger. On the day I entered the hospital for surgery, I deliberately left the fake ring on my bedside table at Marcus's house. I told him I was too nervous to wear it during the procedure and asked him to keep it safe while I was in the hospital. He had agreed readily, and I noticed the way his eyes lingered on the ring as I placed it in my jewelry box. During my 3-week hospital stay, I had plenty of time to think about my family's character and what they might do with access to my possessions. Nurses frequently commented on how few visitors I received, especially compared to other patients who had family members checking on them daily. Marcus and Diana visited me exactly twice during the entire 3-week period, both times asking when I would be released and whether I needed anything from home. Now, sitting in the living room hearing about Diana's exotic vacation, I realized my precautions had been not only wise, but absolutely necessary. "I am so happy Diana had a wonderful time," I said sweetly, maintaining my calm demeanor despite the rage building inside me. "Thailand sounds absolutely magical. I would love to hear all about the elephant sanctuary and those beautiful beaches you mentioned." Diana launched into an enthusiastic description of her vacation, while Marcus nodded approvingly from his chair. She showed me hundreds of photos on her phone. Luxurious resort rooms overlooking pristine beaches, elaborate spa treatments, romantic dinners with her boyfriend Tyler, and adventure excursions through tropical forests. The level of extravagance was staggering, clearly far beyond what Diana could have afforded on her real estate agent salary. The resort cost $1,200 per night, Diana gushed, and Tyler surprised me with a helicopter tour of the islands that was another $800. We also went scuba diving with a private instructor and took a cooking class with a world-famous chef. It was like living in a dream. I calculated quickly in my head. 3 weeks at $1,200 per night was over $25,000 just for accommodation, adding flights, meals, activities, and shopping. Diana's vacation had easily cost $35,000 or more. How wonderful that you could afford such a luxurious trip, I said carefully, watching Marcus's expression. Well, I could not have done it without Dad's generosity, Diana replied, squeezing Marcus's hand. He said the ring money was enough to cover everything, and Tyler contributed some savings too. It was perfect timing because I had been feeling so stressed about work and really needed a break. Marcus's chest puffed with pride. Diana works very hard in real estate, and she deserved to have something special. Your ring was just sitting in a jewelry box doing nothing, Julia. At least now it provided Diana with memories that will last a lifetime. The casual way he dismissed my most precious possession as worthless decoration made my stomach turn. This was not just theft. It was a calculated betrayal during my most vulnerable moment. They had waited until I was unconscious and helpless before stealing from me. Where exactly did you sell the ring? I asked with genuine curiosity. Jameson Fine Jewelry on Main Street, Marcus replied proudly. The owner, Mr. Jameson, gave us $18,000 cash for it. He said it was a beautiful piece and would sell quickly to the right customer. I nodded thoughtfully. Jameson Fine Jewelry was a reputable establishment that had been in Charlotte for over 40 years. Mr. Jameson was known for his expertise in appraising valuable gemstones and had built his reputation on honest dealings with customers. $18,000 sounds like a fair price, I said carefully. I hope Mr. Jameson was able to find the right buyer for such a special piece. He said he already had a customer interested in that style of ring, Diana added. Someone who was looking for an engagement ring in that exact size and setting. It worked out perfectly for everyone. I felt a cold satisfaction wash over me as I imagined what would happen when Jameson's customer took the ring for professional appraisal, as most people do with expensive jewelry purchases. The thought of Mr. Jameson discovering he had unknowingly sold cubic zirconia as genuine diamonds made my smile grow wider. I am just grateful Diana had such an amazing experience, I said softly. And I'm sure everything will work out exactly as it should. Marcus studied my face suspiciously. You are taking this remarkably well, Julia. I expected you to be more upset about the ring. What is done, I replied with a shrug. Besides, family should support each other during difficult times. If my ring could give Diana such happiness, then perhaps David would have wanted it that way. The mention of my late husband seemed to ease Marcus's concerns. He had always felt slightly guilty about his lack of support during David's illness, and invoking David's memory was an effective way to shut down further questions. I excused myself to rest, claiming I was still tired from the surgery recovery. As I walked to my old bedroom, I could hear Diana continuing to describe her vacation adventures to Marcus. Their voices were filled with satisfaction and joy, completely oblivious to the reckoning that was coming their way. Over the next few days, I played the role of the grateful, recovering family member while carefully documenting everything about their theft. I took photos of Diana's vacation pictures displayed proudly around the house, recorded conversations where Marcus boasted about solving Diana's financial problems with my ring money, and made detailed notes about their spending timeline. Diana had returned from Thailand exactly 3 weeks after my surgery, which meant they had sold my ring almost immediately after I entered the hospital. The calculated nature of their timing was particularly cruel. They had not even waited to see if I would survive the surgery before stealing from me. "I was so worried about you during the operation," Diana said over breakfast one morning, completely contradicting her actions. "But Dad said you would want us to make good use of the ring money while you were recovering. He thought it would cheer you up to know I was having a wonderful time." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I knew you would want Diana to benefit from your ring, rather than having it locked away unused. You have always been such a generous sister." Their ability to rewrite history and present themselves as thoughtful family members was breathtaking. They had genuinely convinced themselves that stealing from me during surgery was somehow an act of love and consideration. I called my office to check on work projects, using the conversation to casually mention my timeline for returning to Charlotte. My colleagues at Bright Hollow Labs expressed concern about my recovery and suggested I take additional time off if needed. I assured them I was healing well and would be back to full capacity soon. That afternoon, I drove to First National Bank to check on my safety deposit box. The real wedding ring sparkled brilliantly under the bank's fluorescent lights, its 3-carat center diamond catching every ray of light with stunning brilliance. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with smaller diamonds surrounding the center stone in a platinum setting that David had chosen specifically to complement my hand. I held the ring for several minutes, remembering the day David had surprised me with it. He had planned an elaborate presentation during our anniversary dinner, getting down on one knee in the restaurant to present it as a symbol of his eternal love. The memory brought tears to my eyes, but also strengthened my resolve to protect David's legacy from my family's greed. The contrast between my genuine ring and the cubic zirconia replica was subtle but significant. While the fake looked convincing to casual observers, the real diamonds had a depth and fire that no artificial stone could replicate. A professional jeweler with proper equipment would identify the fake immediately upon close examination. I returned the real ring to its secure box and drove back to Marcus's house, where Diana was showing neighbors more photos from her Thailand vacation. She had invited several friends over for an impromptu gathering, eager to share stories about her exotic adventure. "Julia's ring made it all possible," Diana announced loudly to the assembled group. "Dad surprised me with the most generous gift by selling it while she was in the hospital. He said she would want me to have amazing experiences rather than letting expensive jewelry sit unused." The neighbors looked uncomfortable with Diana's casual admission that she had funded her vacation with her sister's wedding ring, especially while I was recovering from surgery. Several people glanced at me sympathetically, clearly recognizing the inappropriate nature of the situation. "How thoughtful of your father," one neighbor said carefully, "to make such decisions during Julia's medical crisis." The subtle criticism in her tone went completely over Diana's head, but I caught the disapproving looks exchanged between several guests. Word would spread through the neighborhood about Marcus and Diana's behavior, adding another layer to the consequences they would soon face. I smiled graciously and thanked everyone for their concern about my recovery, playing the role of the forgiving sister while internally counting down the days until their deception would be exposed. 1 week after learning about the theft, I was preparing dinner when the doorbell rang insistently. Marcus was at his weekly poker game, and Diana was at work showing properties to clients. I was alone in the house, still technically recovering but feeling much stronger each day. Through the front window, I could see a man in an expensive suit standing on the porch, holding a small jewelry box and looking extremely agitated. My heart rate increased as I realized this might be the moment I had been anticipating. I opened the door to find a distinguished gentleman in his 60s, with silver hair and a deeply troubled expression. "Good evening. I am looking for Marcus Henderson. I am Harold Jameson from Jameson Fine Jewelry." "Hello, Mr. Jameson. I am Julia, Marcus's daughter. He's not home right now, but I can take a message for him." I kept my voice neutral despite my excitement. Mr. Jameson's face was grim. "Miss Henderson, I need to speak with your father immediately about a very serious matter. 3 weeks ago, he sold me a diamond ring that he claimed belonged to you. I have discovered that the ring is completely fraudulent." I gasped in apparent shock. "Fraudulent? What do you mean?" "The stones are cubic zirconia, not diamonds," Mr. Jameson explained, his voice tight with anger. "I sold the ring to a customer yesterday for $22,000. When she took it for insurance appraisal this morning, the gemologist immediately identified it as worthless costume jewelry. My customer is threatening legal action, and my reputation is on the line." I invited Mr. Jameson inside, expressing appropriate concern and confusion. "I cannot understand how this could have happened. That ring was my late husband's gift to me, and he assured me it was genuine." "Miss Henderson, either your husband was deceived when he purchased this ring, or someone in your family knowingly sold me fake jewelry," Mr. Jameson said firmly. "I need immediate restitution of the $18,000 I paid, plus damages for the humiliation I have suffered with my customer." At that moment, Diana burst through the front door, having returned early from work. She froze when she saw Mr. Jameson, her face paling as she recognized him. "Mr. Jameson, what brings you here?" Diana asked with forced cheerfulness. "Miss Henderson," Mr. Jameson turned to face Diana, "I am here because your father sold me fraudulent jewelry 3 weeks ago. The ring you claimed was worth $25,000 contains nothing but worthless cubic zirconia." Diana's mouth dropped open in genuine shock. "That is impossible. Julia's ring was definitely real. She wore it every day for years." "I have the gemologist's report right here," Mr. Jameson said, pulling out official documents. "Every stone in that ring is artificial. Your father committed fraud, and I demand immediate payment of $18,000 plus additional compensation for my damaged reputation." I watched Diana's face as the reality sank in. Her vacation, her exotic adventures, her bragging to neighbors and friends, all of it had been funded by worthless fake jewelry. The humiliation was visible as her confident expression crumbled into confusion and fear. "But Julia wore that ring constantly," Diana protested weakly. "How could it be fake?" Mr. Jameson's expression was unforgiving. "That is between your family and the police, Miss Henderson. I will be filing criminal fraud charges tomorrow morning, unless I receive full restitution tonight. Your father assured me the ring was authentic and valuable. He committed a serious crime." Just then, Marcus's car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I could see him parking and gathering his things from the poker game. He looked relaxed and satisfied, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. Diana and I stood frozen in the living room, while Mr. Jameson waited by the door, still holding the jewelry box containing the worthless ring that had destroyed their credibility and financial security. Marcus walked through the front door whistling cheerfully, clearly having had a successful evening at poker. His smile vanished immediately when he saw Mr. Jameson standing in the living room with Diana and me, all wearing serious expressions. "Mr. Henderson," Jameson said without preamble, "I am here about the ring you sold me 3 weeks ago. It is completely fraudulent." Marcus's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, denial, and then growing panic as the implications became clear. "What are you talking about?" "Julia's ring was genuine. She wore it for years. Every stone in this ring is cubic zirconia," Mr. Jameson stated, opening the jewelry box to reveal the fake ring. "My customer discovered this when she took it for insurance appraisal. I sold her worthless costume jewelry for $22,000, and now she is threatening to sue me for fraud." Marcus sank into his recliner, his face draining of color. "But that is impossible. Julia, tell him about your ring. David bought it from a reputable jeweler." I took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment I had been waiting for. "Actually, Dad, I need to tell you something important about that ring." All eyes turned to me as I maintained my calm composure. 3 months ago, I had my ring appraised for insurance purposes. The jeweler mentioned how vulnerable expensive jewelry can be to theft, especially during times when people are incapacitated or hospitalized. He suggested I consider keeping a replica for daily wear while storing the original safely. Marcus's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. Diana grabbed the back of a chair for support. I had an exact cubic zirconia replica made and began wearing it instead of my real ring. The authentic ring has been in a bank safety deposit box for months. I paused, letting the revelation sink in completely. I suspected that during my surgery recovery, someone might be tempted to take advantage of my vulnerability. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, while Diana made a strangled sound of disbelief. "You deliberately set us up," Marcus whispered, his voice filled with shock and growing rage. "You knew we would sell your ring, so you left us a fake." "I protected my most valuable possession because I know my family's character," I replied calmly. "I never told you to steal from me during my surgery. I never gave you permission to sell my ring. You made those choices entirely on your own." Diana collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. "Oh my God, we are going to jail. Tyler will leave me. Everyone will know we are thieves and frauds." Mr. Jameson's expression had shifted from anger to fascination as he watched the family drama unfold. "Miss Henderson, are you saying you anticipated this theft and prepared accordingly?" "I hoped my family would respect my belongings during my medical crisis," I said carefully. "But I also took precautions to protect something irreplaceable, my late husband's final gift to me." Marcus stood up abruptly, his face red with fury. "You manipulated us. You knew we needed money, and you deliberately left fake jewelry knowing we might sell it." "I left my ring in my jewelry box in my room," I corrected firmly. "You stole it without permission while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. The fact that you stole something worthless instead of something valuable does not change the nature of your crime." Mr. Jameson cleared his throat. "Regardless of the family dynamics, I still need $18,000 immediately. My customer is demanding refunds, and I have lawyers threatening lawsuits. This situation has severely damaged my business reputation." Marcus turned desperate eyes toward me. "Julia, you have to help us. Get your real ring, and we can sell it to fix this mess." I smiled sweetly at my father. "My real ring is safely protected where thieves cannot reach it. You made your choices, Dad. Now you get to live with the consequences." Marcus and Diana sat in stunned silence as their world crumbled around them, finally understanding that their greed and cruelty had led them into a trap of their own making. The daughter they had underestimated and betrayed had outsmarted them completely, and now they faced criminal charges, financial ruin, and social humiliation for their failed attempt to profit from her medical crisis. Marcus and Diana faced immediate criminal fraud charges and civil lawsuits when Mr. Jameson filed police reports the following morning, leading to their arrests and a highly publicized court case that destroyed their reputations throughout Charlotte. Diana lost her real estate license when her criminal conviction became public record, while Marcus faced professional sanctions that ended his financial planning career and forced him to declare bankruptcy to pay legal fees and restitution. Their friends and neighbors completely shunned them when the full story emerged, leaving them isolated pariahs who had to sell Marcus's house and move to a different city to escape the shame of being known as the family who stole from their daughter during her surgery recovery. Julia returned to her successful career at Bright Hollow Labs with a renewed appreciation for the importance of protecting herself from those who would exploit her kindness, keeping David's authentic ring safe in her possession, while building a future free from the toxic family members who had finally revealed their true character. As I admired the genuine diamond ring sparkling on my finger in my new apartment, I reflected on how this painful chapter had taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is protecting what matters most from those who would destroy it, and that revenge served with patience and intelligence is far more satisfying than any angry confrontation could ever be. "No, don't do it," my mother Patricia screamed across our dining room, her voice filled with terror that made my blood run cold. I was sitting at our beautifully set Christmas table in Phoenix, Arizona, my fork halfway to my mouth with a bite of honey-glazed ham, when she suddenly bolted upright from her chair like she had seen a ghost. Before I could even ask what was wrong, my mother collapsed to the floor with a sickening thud. The fork clattered from my hand as I rushed to her side, my heart pounding against my ribs. Her face was pale as winter snow, and her breathing came in short, desperate gasps. "Mom! Mom, what's happening?" I cried, dropping to my knees beside her trembling form. Vincent, my stepfather of 3 years, appeared beside me with surprising speed. "Call 911, Mary. Something's terribly wrong." As we waited for the ambulance, my mother's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. Her hand gripped mine with surprising strength, and she whispered words that would haunt me for weeks to come. "Do not trust anyone." Those 4 words sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the December evening. Why would she say something so ominous? What had she seen or discovered that made her collapse in terror at the sight of me eating dinner? My name is Mary Thompson, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a marketing coordinator for Sundale Financial here in Phoenix, and until that Christmas evening, I thought my biggest worry was whether my latest advertising campaign would meet its quarterly targets. I live alone in a cozy apartment downtown, but I always spent holidays with my mother and Vincent at their sprawling house in the suburbs. Vincent had been a welcome addition to our family after my father passed away 4 years earlier. He was attentive, charming, and seemed genuinely devoted to making my mother happy during her golden years. They met at a grief support group, and their relationship blossomed quickly into what appeared to be a loving second chance at happiness. But as the paramedics loaded my unconscious mother into the ambulance, Vincent's concerned expression seemed different somehow. There was something in his eyes that I couldn't quite place, something that made my mother's final warning echo even louder in my mind. The Christmas dinner sat abandoned on the table, the festive mood completely shattered. As I grabbed my purse to follow the ambulance to the hospital, I caught Vincent glancing back at the dining room with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't grief or worry. It was something much more calculating, and it made my stomach twist with unease. At Phoenix General Hospital, the doctors worked frantically to stabilize my mother, while Vincent and I paced the sterile waiting room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in an unforgiving glow that made Vincent's face look almost skeletal. "She just collapsed out of nowhere," I told Dr. Williams when he finally emerged from the emergency room. "She screamed at me not to eat, and then she was on the floor." Dr. Williams frowned, consulting his clipboard. "We're running extensive tests, but her symptoms suggest some kind of toxin exposure. Her blood work shows elevated levels that indicate poisoning." "Poisoning?" Vincent's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine shock. "How is that possible?" The doctor shook his head grimly. "We're not sure yet. Has she been feeling ill lately? Any unusual symptoms or behaviors?" I thought back over the past few weeks. My mother had seemed quieter than usual, more withdrawn. There were several occasions when I caught her staring at Vincent with a strange expression, almost like she was studying him. When I asked about it, she simply said she was tired and had been having trouble sleeping. "She's been a bit distant," I admitted, but nothing that seemed serious. "We'll know more once all the test results come back," Dr. Williams said. "For now, she's stable but unconscious. We're doing everything we can." As the hours dragged by, I found myself replaying every detail of the evening. Vincent had prepared most of the Christmas dinner himself, insisting it would be his gift to us. He spent all day in the kitchen, shooing us away whenever we offered to help. At the time, I thought it was sweet that he wanted to take care of everything. Now, sitting in that hospital waiting room, my mother's warning kept echoing in my head. Don't trust anyone. But surely she couldn't have meant Vincent. He had been nothing but loving and supportive since joining our family. He helped with my mother's finances, took care of household repairs, and always seemed genuinely concerned about her well-being. Yet something nagged at me. Vincent had been particularly insistent that I sit in a specific chair at dinner, claiming it had the best view of their new Christmas tree. He had also personally served my plate, making sure I got the best pieces of everything. I watched him now as he sat across from me, his head in his hands. He looked like a man devastated by his wife's sudden illness, but there was something about his posture that seemed almost too perfect, too theatrical. "I can't believe this is happening," he said, looking up at me with eyes that seemed to be searching my face for something. "Your mother means everything to me." "I know," I replied automatically, but the words felt hollow in my mouth. As we settled in for what would clearly be a long night, I couldn't shake the feeling that my mother's collapse wasn't the random medical emergency it appeared to be. Something had terrified her enough to risk her own safety to stop me from eating that dinner, and I was determined to find out what it was. 3 days passed with my mother remaining in a medically induced coma while the doctors worked to flush the toxins from her system. Vincent and I took turns sitting by her bedside, but I found myself watching him more carefully than I ever had before. On the 4th day, while Vincent was at home showering and changing clothes, I decided to return to my mother's house to collect some of her personal items for the hospital. What I found there would change everything I thought I knew about my family. The Christmas dinner still sat on the table, untouched since that terrible evening. The food had spoiled, filling the house with a sickly sweet smell that made my stomach churn. As I approached my place setting, my mother's terrified scream echoed in my memory. Something compelled me to examine my plate more closely. Unlike the other servings, mine seemed to have a faint, chalky residue that didn't match the natural appearance of the food. Acting on pure instinct, I carefully scraped some of the residue into a small container I found in the kitchen. That afternoon, I drove to a private laboratory across town, claiming I needed to test some questionable food for my elderly mother's safety. The technician was sympathetic and agreed to rush the analysis. The results came back 2 hours later, and they confirmed my worst fears: rat poison. A lethal dose had been mixed specifically into my portion of the Christmas dinner. My hands shook as I stared at the lab report. Someone had deliberately tried to murder me, and my mother had somehow discovered the plot, just in time to save my life. But who would want me dead? And why? I sat in my car outside the laboratory, my mind racing through possibilities. I was a single woman with no enemies, no significant debts, and no dramatic relationships that might inspire such hatred. The only thing of value I possessed was a modest inheritance from my grandmother that I had received 2 years earlier. Money that would revert to my mother if something happened to me. But if someone wanted to harm my family's finances, killing me wouldn't accomplish much. My mother was the real holder of the family wealth, having inherited the bulk of my grandmother's estate, along with my father's life insurance and retirement savings. Unless someone was planning to eliminate both of us. The thought hit me like a physical blow. If both my mother and I died, who would inherit everything? As my mother's husband, Vincent would be the natural beneficiary of her estate. And if I died first, my portion would simply make his eventual inheritance even larger. I thought about Vincent's insistence on preparing dinner himself, his careful arrangement of seating, his theatrical concern at the hospital. Had my mother discovered his plan? Was that why she looked so frightened when she saw me about to eat the poisoned food? With trembling fingers, I started my car and drove toward the hospital. I needed to search through my mother's personal effects and see if she had left any clues about what she had discovered. If Vincent was behind this, I was going to find the evidence to prove it. At the hospital, I waited until Vincent left for his evening coffee run before searching through my mother's purse and the bag of clothes I had brought from home. Hidden in the inside pocket of her favorite cardigan, I found something that made my blood run cold: a folded piece of paper with Vincent's handwriting. The note was a crude calculation of asset values, listing my mother's bank accounts, property value, life insurance policies, and investment portfolios. At the bottom, he had written M's portion with a question mark, followed by calculations showing various scenarios if I were to die before my mother. My hands trembled as I photographed the note with my phone. This was evidence of premeditation, but I needed more than just his financial calculations. I needed proof of his actual plan. Over the next 2 days, I played the role of the grieving stepdaughter while secretly investigating Vincent's background. I hired a private investigator named Janet Rodriguez, explaining that I had concerns about my stepfather's past. What she discovered was even more disturbing than I had imagined. Vincent had been married twice before my mother. His first wife died in what was ruled an accidental drug overdose, and his second wife died from food poisoning during a romantic dinner he had prepared. Both deaths occurred within 3 years of marriage, and in both cases, Vincent inherited significant assets. The police investigated both deaths, Janet explained during our meeting at a coffee shop downtown, but there wasn't enough evidence to pursue charges. However, the pattern is concerning. Your stepfather seems to have a talent for becoming widowed under financially beneficial circumstances. I felt sick to my stomach. My mother, in her grief over my father's death, had unknowingly invited a predator into our family. Vincent had spent 3 years gaining her trust, learning about our family's finances, and positioning himself to inherit everything. There's more, Janet continued. I found records showing that Vincent recently increased your mother's life insurance policy and changed the beneficiary details. He's also been making inquiries about the probate process and estate transfer procedures. The evidence was damning, but I still needed proof of the actual poisoning attempt. That evening, I returned to my mother's house while Vincent was at the hospital. I needed to search his personal space for evidence of the rat poison or any other clues about his murderous plan. In Vincent's home office, tucked behind a row of books on the shelf, I found a small metal container that made my heart race. It was rat poison, with only about half the contents remaining. The container was partially hidden, but not well enough to escape a thorough search. I photographed everything, careful not to disturb the positioning. Then I noticed something else, a manila folder labeled Insurance and Estate Documents, sitting on his desk. Inside were copies of life insurance policies, will documents, and what appeared to be forged signatures on several beneficiary change forms. Among the papers was a handwritten timeline in Vincent's writing, detailing his plan. It was methodical and chilling. Phase 1. Eliminate M during Christmas dinner. Stages accident what food poisoning. Phase 2. Console P through grief. Assume caretaker role. Phase 3. P's natural health decline within 2 to 3 years. Phase 4. Full estate transfer. Relocate to new state. The clinical nature of his planning made me nauseous. He had mapped out the murder of his wife and stepdaughter like a business strategy, complete with timelines and contingency plans. But the most damning evidence was what I found in his computer's search history. Over the past 2 months, Vincent had researched untraceable poisons, inheritance laws, and even how to comfort a grieving spouse. He had also looked up real estate listings in Florida and information about changing one's identity. I copied everything onto a flash drive and carefully returned the room to its original state. As I prepared to leave, I heard Vincent's car pulling into the driveway. My heart pounded as I slipped out the back door and around to where I had parked my car down the street. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed to be strategic about how to use it. If I went to the police immediately, Vincent might destroy evidence or flee. Instead, I decided to set a trap that would expose him completely and ensure he faced justice for his crimes. The next morning, I called Vincent with carefully planned news. "The doctors say Mom might be waking up soon," I told him, watching his reaction closely through the hospital room window. "They want to reduce her sedation gradually and see if she responds." Vincent's face went through a series of expressions that confirmed my worst suspicions. First came what looked like genuine relief, quickly followed by something much darker: worry, calculation, and what I could only describe as fear. "That's wonderful news," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'll be right there." Over the next several hours, I observed Vincent's behavior around my mother's bedside. When he thought I wasn't watching, his expressions were cold and calculating. He seemed to be studying the medical equipment, the nurses' schedules, and the security cameras in the room. That afternoon, I implemented the first part of my plan. I arranged to meet with Detective Sarah Martinez from the Phoenix Police Department, explaining that I had discovered evidence of attempted murder. I presented her with copies of all the documentation I had gathered, along with the lab results showing rat poison in my Christmas dinner. This is serious evidence, Detective Martinez said, reviewing the photographs and documents. But we need to be careful about how we proceed. If Vincent suspects we're onto him, he might try to flee or destroy evidence. I have an idea, I said. What if we set up a controlled situation where he reveals his plans himself? We work together to design a plan that would give Vincent an opportunity to incriminate himself while ensuring my mother's safety. Detective Martinez arranged for undercover officers to monitor the hospital, and we set up recording equipment that would capture any conversations in my mother's room. The next day, I told Vincent that the doctors wanted to try waking my mother up and that she might be able to communicate within a few hours. I also mentioned, seemingly casually, that the police had asked me some questions about the Christmas dinner incident. What kind of questions? Vincent asked, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. Oh, just routine stuff about whether Mom had any enemies or if anyone might want to hurt her. They're treating it as a potential poisoning case now. Vincent's face went pale. Poisoning? But the doctors said it could have been food contamination or a reaction to something. Apparently the blood tests showed something more specific. I lied smoothly. They think someone might have deliberately tried to harm her. That evening, Vincent requested some private time with my mother. Through the surveillance equipment Detective Martinez had installed, we recorded him as he sat beside her unconscious form and began to speak in a low, urgent voice. Patricia, I need you to understand something, he whispered, apparently believing she couldn't hear him. If you wake up and start talking about Christmas dinner, it's going to cause problems for both of us. The police are already sniffing around, and if they start investigating too closely, they might discover things that would be better left buried. He paused, looking around the room nervously before continuing. I know you found my research notes. I know that's why you stopped Mary from eating. But you have to understand, this was the only way. Your family has more money than you'll ever need, and I've worked so hard to take care of you. I deserve to be taken care of too. The recording captured everything: his admission that my mother had discovered his plan, his confirmation that he had poisoned my food, and his complete lack of remorse for nearly murdering 2 people for financial gain. Detective Martinez and I listened to the recording from the hospital security office, and I felt a mixture of vindication and disgust. Vincent had sealed his own fate with his arrogant confession to what he believed was an unconscious victim. The next morning, we prepared for the final confrontation. Detective Martinez had obtained a warrant for Vincent's arrest based on the evidence I had gathered and his recorded confession. Several officers were positioned throughout the hospital, ready to move in when we gave the signal. I arrived at the hospital early and told Vincent that the doctors were planning to wake my mother up within the hour. His nervous energy was palpable as he paced around the room, clearly agitated by the prospect of my mother regaining consciousness. Maybe we should wait, he suggested. Let her rest a bit longer. There's no rush, right? The doctors think it's time, I said firmly. She's been unconscious for almost a week. We need to know if there's been any permanent damage. At exactly 10 a.m., Detective Martinez entered the room with 2 uniformed officers. Vincent's face went white as he recognized the authority in their bearing. Vincent Morrison, you're under arrest for attempted murder and insurance fraud, Detective Martinez announced, producing her badge. This is ridiculous, Vincent protested, but his voice cracked with panic. I haven't done anything wrong. I love this family. We have evidence that you poisoned Mary's Christmas dinner with rat poison, I said, stepping forward. And we have your confession from last night. Vincent's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. My confession? I don't know what you're talking about. Detective Martinez produced a small recording device. You confessed to your unconscious wife last night, admitting that you poisoned Mary's food and that Patricia discovered your plan. We have it all on tape. As the recording played back Vincent's whispered confession, I watched his face crumble. The charming, caring stepfather facade fell away completely, revealing the cold, calculating predator underneath. You don't understand, he said desperately, looking between me and the officers. "I've been taking care of your mother for 3 years. I've earned the right to be secure in my old age. She has more money than she could ever spend." "So you decided to murder us both for it?" I asked, my voice filled with disgust. "It wasn't supposed to hurt Patricia," he said, as if that made it better. "She was only supposed to find you dead. I would have comforted her through her grief, and eventually, when her time came naturally, I would have been taken care of." Detective Martinez stepped forward. "Vincent Morrison, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they handcuffed him, Vincent made one last desperate plea. "Mary, please, think about what this will do to your mother. The scandal, the publicity. Is that really what you want for her?" "What I want," I said coldly, "is for you to face justice for trying to murder 2 innocent people for money. My mother deserves to know that the man she trusted was planning to kill her family." As the officers led Vincent away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the threat was over, satisfaction that justice would be served, but also deep sadness for what my mother would have to endure when she learned the truth about the man she had loved and trusted. The nightmare was finally over, but I knew the healing process was just beginning. My mother would need time to recover both physically from the poisoning and emotionally from the betrayal. But she was alive. Vincent would face the consequences of his actions, and our family would rebuild stronger than before. Detective Martinez placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Mary. Your courage and persistence probably saved both your lives." I nodded, looking at my mother's peaceful face as she continued her recovery. Soon she would wake up to a world where the threat was gone and justice had prevailed. 2 days after Vincent's arrest, my mother finally began to show signs of awakening. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, and she looked around the hospital room with confusion before her gaze settled on my face. "Mary?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from days of unconsciousness. "I'm here, Mom," I said, taking her hand gently. "You're safe now." As the fog of medication cleared from her mind, I could see the memories returning. Her grip on my hand tightened, and fear flickered across her features. "Vincent," she said urgently. The food." "I know, Mom. I know everything. He's been arrested." Relief washed over her face, followed quickly by tears. "I found his notes," she said weakly. "Papers about insurance money and calculations about what would happen if you died. I couldn't believe it at first." I squeezed her hand. "You saved my life by stopping me from eating that dinner." "I wasn't sure until I saw you with that fork," she continued. "Something about the way he had insisted on serving your plate himself, the way he watched you. I just knew something was terribly wrong." The doctor entered to check on her progress, and Detective Martinez followed shortly after. My mother was strong enough to give her full statement about discovering Vincent's research notes and realizing he had poisoned my food. He had been asking strange questions about my will and the insurance policies, she told Detective Martinez. At first, I thought he was just trying to be helpful with financial planning. But then I found those calculations in his office, and I realized he was planning something horrible. Vincent's trial began 3 months later, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. The prosecution presented the rat poison container with his fingerprints, the forged insurance documents, his research history about untraceable poisons, and most damning of all, his recorded confession to my unconscious mother. During the trial, we learned the full extent of Vincent's criminal history. The prosecutor revealed that he had indeed been responsible for the deaths of his 2 previous wives, and that my mother and I would have been his 3rd and 4th victims. A pattern of financial predation stretched back over 15 years. Vincent's defense attorney tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial and that his client was being framed, but the jury saw through the lies. The recording of his confession was particularly damaging, as it clearly showed his complete lack of remorse and his detailed knowledge of the poisoning plot. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts of attempted murder in the first degree and insurance fraud, Vincent's face went completely blank. The charming mask he had worn for so many years finally slipped away entirely, revealing the hollow, calculating person underneath. "Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" the judge asked. Vincent stood slowly, his lawyer's hand on his shoulder. For a moment, he looked directly at me and my mother in the gallery. "I never meant for Patricia to get hurt," he said quietly. "I genuinely cared about her. But not enough to avoid planning her eventual murder for inheritance money," the judge replied sternly. The judge sentenced Vincent to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole, noting the particularly calculated and predatory nature of his crimes. As the bailiff led him away in shackles, Vincent never looked back at us again. Vincent received a 25-year sentence for attempted murder and elder fraud after prosecutors proved he had systematically planned to eliminate both women for a $2 million inheritance and life insurance payout. His conviction made national news as an example of domestic financial predation, and investigations revealed he had successfully murdered his 2 previous wives using similar methods, making him one of the most callous serial killers to target grieving families in Arizona's history. His professional reputation was destroyed, his assets were seized to pay restitution to his previous victims' families, and he faced additional federal charges for insurance fraud across state lines. The case became a landmark example used by law enforcement to train officers in recognizing patterns of financial abuse, targeting vulnerable widows and their families. 6 months later, my mother and I moved together into a secure apartment complex with advanced security systems, having learned to trust our instincts and protect each other above all else. As I watched my mother regain her strength and confidence, I reflected on how her final act of protection had not only saved our lives, but exposed a predator who would never again be able to harm another family. And I realized that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply ensuring that justice is served completely. "You took what?" I gasped into the phone, my voice cracking as the bank representative repeated the devastating news. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but your retirement account shows a balance of $0. The funds were withdrawn yesterday through electronic transfer." My name is Josephine Thompson. I'm 57 years old, and until that moment, I thought I understood betrayal. I had lost my husband Harold to cancer 3 years ago, endured months of chemotherapy appointments and hospital visits, and somehow found the strength to rebuild my life in Jacksonville, Florida. But nothing had prepared me for this phone call that would shatter everything I believed about family and trust. The phone slipped from my trembling hand as I stared at the stack of bills on my kitchen table. $180,000. Gone. Harold and I had saved every penny for 34 years, sacrificing vacations and luxuries so we could retire comfortably. That money was supposed to cover my medical expenses, keep me in our little house, and provide security for whatever years I had left. Without it, I faced losing everything Harold and I had worked for. My daughter Emily had been acting strangely for months, but I attributed her distance to stress from her new relationship with Travis. She had always been impulsive, making decisions with her heart instead of her head. But stealing from her own mother? The thought made my stomach churn. I grabbed the phone again and dialed her number, praying there was some mistake, some explanation that would make sense of this nightmare. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service," the automated voice announced, each word hitting me like a physical blow. I tried again, convinced I had misdialed, but the same message echoed through my empty house. Emily had vanished along with my life savings, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of her betrayal. I spent the next 3 days in a fog of disbelief, calling banks, checking account statements, and trying to understand how my own daughter could destroy me so completely. The evidence was undeniable: forged signatures on withdrawal forms, fraudulent identification documents, and a paper trail that led directly to Emily and her boyfriend Travis Morrison. They had planned this theft with cold precision, using my grief and trust against me. Harold had always worried about Emily's judgment, especially when it came to men. She had a pattern of falling for smooth talkers who promised her the world, but delivered only heartache. Travis seemed different at first, charming, attentive, always eager to help with my computer problems or household repairs. I should have recognized the signs, should have questioned why a 32-year-old man with no steady job could afford expensive gifts for my daughter. The detective assigned to my case, Officer Patricia Valdez, delivered the crushing news during our second meeting. Mrs. Thompson, I need to be honest with you. Cases like this rarely result in recovery of stolen funds. Your daughter and her boyfriend have likely fled the state, possibly the country. Even if we catch them, the money is usually spent or hidden where we cannot trace it. I sat in that sterile police station, feeling older than my 57 years, wondering how I would survive. My part-time job at Brightmarsh Publishing barely covered basic expenses, and without my retirement funds, I faced foreclosure within months. The house where Harold and I had built our life together, where Emily had taken her first steps and blown out birthday candles, would soon belong to strangers. That evening, as I sorted through old photo albums, I found pictures of Emily as a little girl. Gap-toothed smiles, Halloween costumes, Christmas mornings filled with laughter. Where had I gone wrong? How had my sweet daughter become someone capable of such cruelty? The Emily who used to bring me dandelions and homemade cards would never have stolen from her own mother, especially not the money Harold had worked double shifts to save. Sleep became impossible. I lay awake, calculating how long I could afford groceries, wondering if I should sell Harold's wedding ring to pay the electric bill, contemplating the unthinkable possibility of moving to a nursing home with strangers. Emily knew exactly what she had taken from me. Not just money, but dignity, security, and the future Harold and I had dreamed of together. 2 weeks after discovering the theft, as I sat staring at another stack of overdue bills, my phone buzzed with a text message that made my blood run cold. The sender was listed as Harold, my dead husband's name, and the message read, "Don't worry, we'll fix this and get your money back." My hands shook as I read the words again and again. Someone was using Harold's name, playing a sick joke on a grieving widow. I thought about all the scammers who targeted elderly people, the criminals who preyed on vulnerability and desperation. But something about the message felt different, not threatening or demanding, but strangely comforting. I called the phone number associated with the text, but it went straight to voicemail with no greeting. That night, I received another message. "I know you're scared, but trust me. Emily and Travis think they got away with it, but they're wrong. Justice is coming." The words sent chills down my spine, but also sparked something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Over the next few days, the mysterious Harold sent cryptic updates that suggested someone was actively investigating Emily and Travis. "They're in Miami, living like millionaires on your money. Travis has done this before to other families. Evidence is being gathered." Each message contained details that only someone with inside knowledge could know. I began to wonder if Harold was somehow watching over me, guiding someone to help recover what Emily had stolen. The rational part of my mind rejected such nonsense, but grief makes people believe in impossible things. I had prayed every night for Harold to send me a sign, to show me how to survive without him. Maybe this was his answer. The messages became more specific. Travis Morrison, Social Security number XXXXXXXX, has warrants in 3 states. Emily is using the name Emma Martinez now. Your money is in offshore accounts, but not for long. Whoever was sending these texts had access to information far beyond what a random scammer could obtain. One evening, as I sat reading Harold's old letters, my phone rang from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, fearful of hearing a stranger's voice claiming to be my deceased husband. Instead, I heard something that made my heart stop. "Mom, it's Michael, my son." My estranged son who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years. Not since the terrible fight after Harold's funeral, when he accused me of favoritism toward Emily. Michael, who had become a federal detective and moved to Washington without leaving a forwarding address. Michael, whose middle name was Harold, named after his father. Michael, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I've been watching Emily for months as part of a larger investigation. I couldn't contact you directly without compromising the case, but I've been using Dad's name to keep you informed. Mom, we're going to get your money back, and Emily is going to pay for what she did to you. The revelation that my own son had been secretly helping me, while maintaining his cover as a federal agent, left me speechless. Michael explained that he had been investigating Travis Morrison for months as part of a multi-state fraud task force targeting romance scammers who preyed on elderly victims. Travis isn't just some opportunistic boyfriend, Michael said during our carefully arranged meeting at a coffee shop in downtown Jacksonville. He's part of an organized network that specifically targets widows. They research obituaries, identify women with assets, and then systematically drain their accounts. Emily became involved when she met him through an online dating app that he uses to recruit accomplices. I stared at my son, seeing Harold's determined jaw and serious eyes that I remembered from his childhood. Michael had always been methodical, patient, the type of person who solved puzzles while Emily acted on impulse. You knew Emily was stealing from me, and you didn't warn me? I couldn't, Mom. If I had interfered, Travis would have disappeared, and dozens of other victims would never get justice. Emily was already too deep in his web by the time I identified the connection. The best way to help you was to let the theft happen, and then use it as evidence to bring down the entire operation. The coldness of his logic hurt, but I understood the terrible position Michael had been in. He handed me a thick folder containing photographs, financial records, and surveillance reports. Emily and Travis were living in a luxury penthouse in Miami Beach, driving expensive cars, and dining at restaurants that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. They had stolen from at least 7 other families, accumulating over $500,000 in total. Look at this, Michael said, pointing to a photograph of Emily wearing a diamond necklace. She bought that with money stolen from a 73-year-old woman in Atlanta whose husband died of Alzheimer's. Travis convinced the victim that he loved her, then cleaned out her accounts and moved on to the next target. My daughter's face looked different in the surveillance photos. Harder, calculating, nothing like the vulnerable girl I thought I knew. She had willingly participated in destroying innocent families, ruining the lives of people just like me who were struggling to rebuild after losing their spouses. The Emily I had raised would never have been capable of such cruelty. We've been building a comprehensive case for 8 months, Michael continued. Wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, money laundering. They're looking at federal charges that could mean 15 to 20 years in prison. But I wanted you to be there when we take them down. The coffee shop felt surreal as my son outlined the elaborate sting operation he had designed. Travis thought he was untouchable, moving from state to state, changing identities, leaving a trail of destroyed lives behind him. He had no idea that one of his victims was the mother of a federal detective who had been documenting every crime. Why didn't you just call me after Harold died? I asked, my voice breaking. We wasted 5 years being angry at each other while Emily was being groomed by a criminal. Michael's composure cracked for the first time. I was proud, stubborn, hurt that you seemed to love Emily more than me. When I learned she was involved with Travis, part of me wanted to let her face the consequences alone. But then I saw what they did to you, and I remembered that you're my mother too. Dad would never forgive me if I let his wife lose everything because of my petty resentments. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael shared details about the investigation that made my stomach turn. Travis Morrison wasn't even his real name. He was actually David Trevor Martin, a career criminal with aliases in 12 states. He had refined his romance scam operation over 6 years, specifically targeting widows between 50 and 70 who had recently lost their husbands. He studies obituaries religiously, Michael explained during one of our secret meetings. Then he researches the surviving spouse through social media, property records, anything that gives him insight into their financial situation. Emily was never his real target. You were. He used her to get close to your family and learn about the retirement account. The sophistication of the scheme horrified me. Travis had played the long game, dating Emily for months while subtly gathering information about my finances, my daily routines, my computer passwords. He had even convinced Emily to copy my identification documents under the pretense of helping me organize my paperwork after Harold's death. Emily knew what she was doing, Michael said firmly when I tried to make excuses for her. We have recordings of their conversations planning the theft. She suggested targeting you because she knew your habits and trusted her completely. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated betrayal. The recordings Michael played for me shattered my last hopes that Emily had been manipulated or coerced. Her voice was clear and enthusiastic as she described how easy it would be to access my accounts. My mom is so trusting, she laughed on one recording. She still leaves her banking information sitting on the kitchen counter. We could clean her out and be in the Bahamas before she even notices. I had to excuse myself to cry in the coffee shop bathroom, overwhelmed by the casual cruelty in my daughter's voice. The Emily on those recordings spoke about destroying my life like she was planning a weekend trip. There was no hesitation, no guilt, no recognition that she was stealing from the woman who had raised her with love and sacrifice. The hardest part, Michael admitted, was watching you suffer while I built the case. Every text I sent as Harold was my way of letting you know that someone cared, that you weren't as alone as you felt. I wanted to tell you the truth, but exposing the investigation too early would have meant Travis could destroy evidence and disappear forever. The federal task force had identified at least 23 victims across 8 states, with total losses exceeding $800,000. Travis used a network of accomplices like Emily to gain access to targets, then systematically drained their accounts through forged documents and electronic transfers. Many victims were too ashamed to report the crimes, believing they had been foolish to trust a stranger with their financial information. We're coordinating with local authorities in Florida for the arrest, Michael said. Travis and Emily think they're safe in their Miami penthouse, but we've been watching them for weeks. They have no idea that their landlord is actually an undercover agent, or that every transaction they make is being monitored. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Travis and Emily would be arrested simultaneously at their luxury apartment, with federal agents seizing all assets purchased with stolen funds. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, recorded conversations, digital communications, and testimony from multiple victims who were ready to confront their abusers in court. 3 days before the scheduled arrests, I received a final text from Harold. Tomorrow we finish this. Pack a bag. You're coming to Miami to see justice served. Michael will pick you up at 6 a.m. My hands trembled as I read the message, knowing that 24 hours would determine whether I lost everything or reclaimed my stolen life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house Harold and I had shared for 28 years, touching furniture we had bought together, looking at pictures of happier times when Emily was young and innocent. Part of me still hoped there had been some terrible mistake, that my daughter would have a reasonable explanation for stealing my retirement funds and disappearing. Michael arrived at dawn driving an unmarked federal vehicle, his face grim with the weight of what we were about to witness. "Are you ready for this, Mom?" he asked as I climbed into the passenger seat. Seeing Emily arrested isn't going to be easy, even knowing what she did to you. The 4-hour drive to Miami felt both endless and too short. Michael briefed me on what would happen during the arrest, explaining that Emily and Travis believed they were planning to flee the country within days. They had purchased plane tickets to Costa Rica using false identities, intending to disappear permanently with their stolen fortune. "We found communications where Travis brags about making you his perfect victim," Michael said as we approached the city. "He specifically chose Emily because she could provide inside access to your finances. In his twisted mind, stealing from grieving widows is just business." The Miami Beach penthouse where Emily and Travis were living cost $12,000 per month, more than I earned in 4 months at my publishing job. As we parked across the street, I could see the building's luxury amenities: doorman, valet parking, infinity pool overlooking the ocean. My stolen retirement funds had purchased a lifestyle I could never afford, even in my dreams. Federal Bureau of Investigation! The shout echoed through the penthouse hallway at exactly 7 a.m. as agents flooded the building. Michael had positioned me in the lobby where I could see everything but remain safely out of the way. My heart pounded as I heard doors splintering and voices shouting commands. David Trevor Martin, you're under arrest for wire fraud and elder abuse, Agent Patricia Valdez called out, using Travis's real name. Through the building's glass elevators, I watched Emily emerge from the penthouse in handcuffs, her face pale with shock and terror. Michael, how did you find us? Emily screamed when she saw my son waiting in the lobby. You're supposed to be in Washington. This isn't possible. Your brother's been tracking you this whole time. Travis shouted in panic as federal agents led him toward the patrol cars. You told me he was estranged from the family. Michael stepped forward, his federal badge gleaming in the morning sunlight. Emily Thompson and David Martin, you're both under federal arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Emily's eyes found mine across the lobby, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I never meant for it to go this far. But you did let it go this far, I replied, my voice steady despite my breaking heart. You stole my future and never looked back. The sight of Emily in handcuffs, crying as federal agents read her rights, should have brought me satisfaction. Instead, I felt hollow, watching my daughter pay the price for choices that had destroyed multiple families. Travis remained defiant, cursing and struggling against his restraints, but Emily looked broken and defeated. Mrs. Thompson, Agent Valdez approached me with a thick folder. We've frozen all assets purchased with stolen funds. Your retirement money, along with funds stolen from other victims, will be returned within 60 days. Travis and Emily are looking at federal sentences of 15 to 20 years. Michael stood beside me as we watched the patrol cars disappear into Miami traffic, carrying away the daughter I thought I knew and the criminal who had corrupted her. She made her choice, Mom, he said quietly. Emily knew exactly what she was doing when she helped Travis steal from innocent people. The penthouse apartment yielded evidence of Emily and Travis's lavish lifestyle: designer clothes, expensive jewelry, electronics, and artwork, all purchased with money stolen from grieving families. Federal agents cataloged every item, preparing to liquidate the assets for victim restitution. Your daughter provided detailed information about 23 victims, Agent Valdez explained. She kept records of which families had the most assets, which widows seemed most vulnerable, and how much money they could potentially steal. This wasn't impulse, it was systematic predation. The evidence of Emily's willing participation shattered my last hopes for her innocence. She had actively participated in identifying and targeting vulnerable families, using her inside knowledge to help Travis maximize his thefts. My daughter had become a predator, viewing grieving widows as opportunities rather than human beings. 6 months later, Emily and Travis pleaded guilty to federal charges rather than face trial. Emily received 7 years in federal prison, while Travis was sentenced to 15 years with additional charges pending in multiple states. The judge ordered full restitution to all victims, plus damages for emotional distress. I sat in the courtroom as Emily made her statement, watching her struggle to explain actions that had no justification. I was lonely and desperate for love, she told the judge. Travis convinced me that rich people wouldn't miss the money, that we were just redistributing wealth. Her words rang hollow. The victims' impact statements revealed the true cost of Emily and Travis's crimes. Families forced from their homes, elderly people choosing between medicine and food, widows contemplating suicide rather than face poverty. Emily's selfish choices had created suffering that extended far beyond stolen money. Your actions represent a profound betrayal of family bonds and societal trust, the judge stated during sentencing. You specifically targeted vulnerable people who were grieving the loss of their spouses, showing a level of callousness that demands significant punishment. Michael testified as the investigating agent, his professional demeanor masking the personal pain of watching his sister destroy herself. When Emily looked at him during cross-examination, he met her gaze without flinching. The defendant showed no remorse during the investigation, he stated. She bragged about stealing from her own mother and expressed excitement about fleeing the country with stolen funds. The courtroom was filled with victims and their families, people whose lives had been shattered by Emily and Travis's greed. I recognized the look in their eyes, the same bewilderment and betrayal I had felt when discovering my retirement funds were gone. We were all connected by the trauma these two criminals had inflicted. Emily and Travis faced the complete destruction of their reputations and futures, with federal convictions that would follow them forever. Travis faced additional charges in 3 other states as more victims came forward, virtually guaranteeing he would spend decades in prison. Emily's betrayal of her own mother became a central element of the prosecution's case, painting her as someone willing to destroy even family relationships for money. Their luxury assets were seized and sold at public auction, with proceeds distributed among the victims they had systematically targeted. The case became a landmark prosecution that led to stronger federal protections for elderly fraud victims and mandatory reporting requirements for financial institutions when suspicious transactions involving senior citizens were detected. Michael returned to his position in Washington, but we rebuilt our relationship stronger than before, united by the shared experience of seeking justice for Emily's crimes. I deposited the recovered funds into a new, more secure account, and decided to volunteer with organizations that help fraud victims, turning my painful experience into a way to help others who had suffered similar betrayals. Sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places, and family bonds, even strained ones, can still protect us when we need them most. Though some betrayals cut so deep that forgiveness becomes impossible, and the only healing comes from watching those who wronged us face the full consequences of their choices.